Hi, I'm Jonny Stryder. In this video, we'll explore the basis for deciding conflicts between members of a human DAO. If an organization is decentralized and autonomous, then all members must have equal power. In other words, members cooperate without a management hierarchy or some other authority in charge. You might say no one is in charge, but it's more accurate to say that everyone is in charge. Everyone is responsible for their own obligations and actions, and everyone is responsible for enforcing good behavior within the DAO. But what rules do the members follow, and who has the power and responsibility to make the rules? First, some context. DAOs may be familiar to you as a term applied to peer-to-peer networks of computers, for example, the Bitcoin and Ethereum networks. In these networks, people agree on the computer code the machines will operate to achieve some collective purpose, like operating a blockchain. Code is law. If you don't like the code, you can join or start a network that uses different code. Enforcement is fairly easy. If a rogue machine breaks the code, it can be easily identified. In trustless proof-of-work systems, the rogue machines will be ineffective. In staked systems like Ethereum, the rogue machine will automatically forfeit a stake of cryptocurrency tokens. Human DAOs are not merely groups of people following a common set of rules. If that were true, nations and corporations would be DAOs, but they are not because they lack the essential characteristics of a DAO. Like machine DAOs, human DAOs allow people to join and leave freely without losing access to the property they have contributed to the organization. Also like machine DAOs, human DAOs involve rules of behavior that every member agrees to when joining. In human DAOs, these rules apply to human behavior. Human rules are much more subtle and less predictable than code executed by a machine, obviously. Nonetheless, without rules for behavior, there is no organization and no society. Finally, every member of a human DAO has equal power to enforce the DAO's foundational rules. Nobody can make rules that others must follow. Everyone is autonomous. Enforcement in human DAOs is twofold. First, there's reputation tracking. In a well-crafted DAO, each member's reputation for good behavior is one of their most valuable assets. Enforcement consists of collecting reliable and fair data about members' social behavior that they can use to demonstrate their integrity when needed. Fair and objective neutrals are essential for providing objective reputation feedback when members disagree. These neutrals are members of the DAO and subject to the same enforcement as anyone else. The second part of enforcement is penalties, up to the limit licensed by agreements between DAO members and what is permissible under the applicable legal jurisdiction. In addition to fair reputation tracking, the ability for neutrals to provide legally enforceable arbitration awards when needed is critical to enforcement in human DAOs. Enforcement is a vast subject covered in more detail in other lessons. In this video, we will consider how neutrals discover fair rules for deciding disputes in human DAOs. Okay, so who decides what is right or wrong in any given situation? Generally, it's up to the people involved in an issue to come to some fair resolution of it. But conflicts exist because two parties can't or won't agree on what is fair. Suppose two members of a DAO need help in settling a disagreement. They hire you, a neutral, to consider the facts, apply fair rules to sort out responsibilities, and issue a fair decision. You, as a hired and trusted neutral, are the only person who ensures that disagreements in a DAO are settled fairly. So how do you and your clients, and all the members of the DAO who learn about your decision, How do all these people know the rules you apply are fair? That's the basis of decision and the subject of this video. It's the foundation for all your work as a neutral. As an autonomous neutral, you are responsible for your own decisions. You can be as transparent as you like about your principles, pledges, and practices. But if you are deciding questions of any weight, your clients will surely ask about your principles, pledges, and practices, let's call them your rules, and expect you to comply. You determine how you will govern your conduct as a neutral and tell others about your rules. Once you have committed, you need to comply with your own rules. In addition, you must be aware of the cultural and legal context in which you operate. These twin constraints, your rules and your operating context, limit your freedom of action, but do not form the basis of your decisions. In every case, you must base your decisions on the contracts and pledges of the clients who come before you. Their facts and social promises inform others of their mutually accepted rights and obligations. Respecting the autonomy of your clients means basing your decision on their mutually accepted rights and obligations, and on the facts and circumstances as best you can determine. Each person's chosen rules are the foundation for conflict resolution in human DAOs. Only on this foundation can the neutral reach fair decisions that reinforce positive conduct by members of the DAO, allowing the DAO to achieve its beneficial goals. In a society of equals, the job of a neutral mediator or arbitrator rests on four fundamentals: the claims at issue in a dispute, the facts and circumstances from which the claims arise, the binding agreements between the parties involved, and the social promises of each party. We'll look at each of these in turn. First, there must be at least one claim, an accusation of a broken promise giving rise to an obligation. You might say a claim is a demand for fulfillment of an unpaid obligation previously accepted by the person of whom the demand is made. In a DAO, there are no lawmakers with the power to compel others. All the social obligations and agreements that govern the society are accepted voluntarily and individually by each member. Everyone chooses their own rules. Such a society cannot work unless social obligations are mutual. Reciprocity underlies all order and justice. Reciprocal obligations arise from mutual promises. We can divide these into two categories: agreements, also called contracts, and social promises, also called pledges. Both of these expressions involve mutual promises, but differ in their characteristics. Contracts can and usually do assign different rights and obligations to the parties in agreement. Every agreement is between identified parties. You can't agree with someone who isn't there. For example, if I agree to sell you my car for a set price, you are obliged to pay the price, and I am obliged to deliver my car. In comparison, social promises do not involve multiple identified parties. Each person makes their own social promise within an identified context, for example, to all members of a specific DAO who make a reciprocal social promise. Although social promises are made individually, they are only enforced mutually. No one gets to enforce obligations of a social promise they have not made themselves. We are familiar with agreements from many diverse legal traditions. Social promises are not so familiar, and are not enforceable in traditional legal systems. Instead, social promises fill the social rule-making function for human DAOs. Neutrals for DAOs must understand how to evaluate and base their decisions on reciprocal social promises instead of centralized rules. Authority in human DAOs is based on the voluntary commitments of independent members and nothing else. This is unlike the world as we know it outside of the DAO. The human DAO is surrounded by an alien world in which authority depends on who has the loudest voice, the strongest police force, and the deadliest army. We must reject all authorities other than voluntary commitments of the DAO members seeking settlement of their disagreements, or violate the very autonomy that is the fundamental purpose of the DAO's existence. We, as DAO neutrals, can and should consider external circumstances, such as applicable laws and associated cultural beliefs and biases, when reaching a decision about any particular matter. We should be aware of the effect these external circumstances will have on DAO members who comply with our decisions, and seek to mitigate detriment to our clients caused by these external circumstances to the extent possible. The law is not irrelevant, but it is not the basis for decision. Neutrals of a human DAO are not state-recognized judges, although they are free to choose to comply with legal requirements to render arbitration awards that are legally enforceable. Contracts we are familiar with and can understand. Social promises are even simpler in principle. Any 5-year-old knows how to promise to be good, and social promises are essentially more detailed variations on this kindergarten theme, I promise to be good. Expressing social promises helps members of a DAO understand one another's values and preferences. But there is a challenge to using social promises. We, as a society, are not used to analyzing individually chosen promises as a basis for resolving disputes. There are many questions. What should a neutral do when overlapping social promises on opposing sides are different? What if promises were made at different times? What about people who can't make promises? What if promises are unclear or subject to different interpretations? Many such questions arise when we adopt social promises as a basis for decision. We are used to the idea that the principles of dispute resolution need to be the same for everyone or there will be chaos. This erroneous but widely held belief has caused much tragedy, war, and injustice over the centuries. It's time to think differently. I spent 5 years focused on thinking through the ins and outs of governance by social promises, and wrote a book about it titled Blockchain Faith, linked in the notes below. You may not need to read the whole book to be an effective neutral for a DAO, but you will need to master the nuances of fair decision-making based on the social promises of the members who come before you. We'll cover the most common nuances and challenges in other videos. Neutrals must analyze the objective facts and circumstances involved in the claims. This is the same task that juries and judges are supposed to do in traditional courtrooms. Neutrals have more flexibility in how they approach the task, but the job is basically the same. First, you determine the relevant facts by asking the parties in dispute to identify the facts that support their version of events. Then you examine these relevant facts and identify any that the parties agree on. These are the undisputed facts. Often, disputed facts remain, and these you must examine for relevance and relative credibility based on available evidence. We'll consider how to analyze the facts and evaluate evidence in other videos. Once you have collected all the most relevant and credible facts, you are ready to make a decision based on the agreements and social promises of the parties. By this time in the video, you should have a basic understanding of the basis of decision in conflict resolution for human DAOs and how it differs from conflict resolution in conventional centralized legal systems. You should also have many questions about how the process of decision-making should work in specific cases. We will explore more details and examples in videos to follow. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, provide your feedback by liking, subscribing, and commenting below. This helps others find the video and supports the educational programs of the uRULEu Institute. Thanks again, and peace be with you.